Good day everyone, this is your Sir Balo once again, and for this video we're going to talk about enhanced entity relationship modeling. So the topics here is that, or rather this is actually more of an extension of what was discussed in the previous lesson, which is about entity relationship modeling. Okay, now the outline of these topics will just be focused lang on the following: superclasses and subclasses, and also we're going to talk about more about superclasses and subclasses. Yeah. Okay, so let's start with discussing first what are superclasses and subclasses. So when we say a superclass, it is an entity type that includes one or more distinct subgroupings of its members, which must be represented in a data model. So take note, when we say superclass, it is a entity type. It's a special entity type that includes, that has, meron siyang, could be isa or maraming iba-ibang subgroupings. So later on, we're going to have an example, but to just to demonstrate the example for superclasses and subclasses. Then as for the subclasses, is a distinct subgrouping of members of an entity type, which must be represented in a data model. So when we say a subclass, it's just a subgrouping of members of an entity type from that were based from its superclass. But anyway, let's have this example just in order for you to grasp the concept of superclass and subclasses. So for example, we have here a staff entity, and these are the members of the staff entity. So try to observe, just for a few seconds, the attributes for each member or instance of staff, and the values. Okay, now if we're going to analyze this deeper, start noticing that for this each member of staff entity, they have their attributes that are common among members of staff. So what are these? Ano ba itong mga attributes na in which lahat ng member ng staff is meron? We have the following. So we have the staff number, the name, the position, and salary. So these attributes are present to all members of staff. Now if we're going to analyze this or observe this deeper, there are also attributes in which they are only existing to some instances. For example, we have here itong manager start date. Is only available, or only rather, we only have two members that has the manager start date and bonus. And in this we have here this member of the entity, name niya is Robert Chin. Iba naman yung sa kanya, he has this member of entity has this sales area and car allowance attributes that are not present to these two, or rather these three other members of the staff. So yeah. So therefore, there are some members of staff that are distinct from other members. Diba? Each of them have their own unique way, though they have common attributes, but at the same time they also have their own attributes that are distinct, no? And so that makes them distinct to one another. Now, if we're going to analyze pa deeper, in fact, I mentioned ko na to kanina, no? For example, this first row, no? So you're going to analyze this one. Both of these two members of staff have the same attributes, no? Aside from the common attributes, the staff, the name, the position, and salary, they are also, both of them have the manager start date and bonus attributes. Now, why is that, no? Such case na merong ganito? It's because they are members of a manager subgroup. Now, rather, these staffs are also members of manager, no? These are managers, no? Just to, in other words, no? And for the second row, this one, no? These two here also have the same set of attributes, sales area and car allowance. It's because these two members are also, specifically though, they are members of the salesperson subgroup. And lastly, we have here this one, this lonely only member here that has his own attribute. Here we have typing speed. So this typing speed doesn't exist. This attribute doesn't exist in the other members of the staff. It's only exclusive for this member. It's because this entity is a member of a secretary subgroup. Now, if we're going to analyze our previous definition, no, we can say that since staff, no, has this entity na staff, meron siyang maraming subgroupings. In fact, there are 3 subgroupings. So we could say that this staff is a superclass. No? And anyway, we have this next slide, no? So yan, ito. Just to illustrate what I mean. So this staff here is therefore a superclass because it has the following subgroupings. First, we have the manager, then we have the secretary, and then we have the sales personnel. Okay, sorry for the minor and technical basta these 3 here, these are subgroupings, or rather these are subclasses, no, for this staff entity. And staff can be is what we consider as a superclass type of entity, no? Yeah. Now, we're going to analyze this deeper pa, no? We could say that each member of a subclass, let's say manager, no? All managers are also members of the staff. Yeah. Same with secretary, all members of the secretary subgroup or subclass are also members of the superclass na staff. And also all members of the sales personnel are also members of the staff entity. So in other words, the entity in the subclass, no, the entities in the subclass, these 3 subclasses, no, is the same entity in the superclass but has a distinct role. So, yun. Okay. So yeah. Just to emphasize, no. Again, staff is a superclass because it has the following subgroupings or rather subclasses. And the subclasses are its subclasses, no, are manager, secretary, and salesperson. Yeah. Okay. So this is how we're going to illustrate the superclass and subclass. No? So we have here the staff entity. Kanina, no? The superclass staff entity and the subclasses manager, salesperson, and secretary. No? So attributes are specific to a given subclass. Attributes that are specific, attributes that are specific to a given subclass are listed in the lower section of the rectangle representing the subclass. So for example, the sales area, no? Ito to, the sales area, and car allowance attributes. Okay, sorry, nakalimutan ko pala. I should use this one. Yan, ito. Just to emphasize what I'm saying. As I mentioned, no, attributes that are specific to a given subclass are listed in the lower section of the rectangle representing that subclass. So for example, the sales area and car allowance attributes are associated only with the salesperson subclass and are not applicable, this is applicable to the manager or the secretary subclasses. So similarly, we show also attributes that are specific to the manager only. Manager start date and bonus. And as for the secretary subclass, we have typing speed. Meanwhile, no, the attributes that are common, no, yung mga di ba na-mention ko na mga attributes na common, no, that are common to all subclasses, they are listed, no, in the lower section of the rectangle representing the superclass. So ito, these four attributes here are these are the common sub attributes. So we could say that the manager, the salesperson, and the secretary, each of these subclasses have these attributes. So we could say that manager has a total of 6 attributes, salesperson has a total of 6 attributes, and secretary has a total of 5 attributes. Again, baka malito kayo, yung manager lang, baka pag-analyze nyo, manager, yung attributes lang niya, manager start date, bonus, hindi. It's because we have here this symbol here, this arrow, which points to an entity, which means that this manager is a subclass of this staff superclass. Therefore, these attributes na under dito staff are also should be present. It's implied it's present sa manager na entity. Okay, I hope that this slide is clear. So next, take note that we can also show relationships that are only applicable to specific subclasses. So for example, in this figure, no, the manager subclass, ito, is related to the branch entity through the manager's relationship. No? Whereas the staff superclass is related to the branch entity through the has relationships. No? So to elaborate further, no? So it is possible that a subclass has a relationship to its another entity, and its tama ba yung pag-mention? A superclass can have a relationship with another entity, but also its subclasses. Let's say for this instance, the manager, which is a subclass of the staff entity, it could also have a relationship with other entities. So if we're going to interpret this one, no, branch has staff, no, and the manager manages branch, which is correct, precisely. So if you're going to illustrate your ER model, no, na you are going to emphasize the a certain subclass sa superclass has specific certain type of relationship to another entity. So you could perhaps do this one. No, it's possible. Okay, so we have other examples of superclasses. So this time, just like to emphasize lang this part. Ito. Okay, itong encircle. So it's also possible that subclasses or superclasses could share a subclass. No? For this instance, we have the manager and salesperson. So these are their subclass is sales manager. No? Now since both the manager and the salesperson have the same subclass, which is sales manager, so therefore this entity here, this is what we call a shared subclass. So the reason that bakit may ganitong instance, no, is because it's possible that a manager and a manager can also be a manager for a salesperson, or a salesperson can also be a manager. Yeah. So yeah, so it's possible that you can have both an entity that inherits. No, later we'll talk about inheritance. No, this entity sales manager inherits both the attributes for the manager and salesperson. So you could say that this sales manager has a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 attributes all. Okay, so we have here this what we call generalization. So it's the process of minimizing the differences between entities by identifying their common characteristics. So to give you an illustration of how generalization works, so we have the following. So let's say for example, no, yung pagkaka-design mo, no, sa we have here an ER model in which, let's say for example lang, no, the manager, the sales personnel, and secretary are separate entities, ba? And as you notice, these three entities have a common attribute, no? Which are obviously the staff, the name, position, and salary. No? So if we apply the process of generalization on these entities, we attempt to identify similarities between them. No? Again, if we're going to apply the process of generalization sa mga entities na to, so we need to identify the similarities between these three. No? Ano yung common attributes nila or relationships. So as I stated earlier, these entities share the attributes that are common to all staff. So the staff number, name, position, salary. Okay. And therefore, no, we identify these three as a subclass of a generalized staff superclass. So ganon. Ganito na yung mangyayari after the generalization. So in-extract natin yung common attributes, nilagay natin dito to a separate rectangle or rather entity, and then we add an arrow. No, these three subclasses, they diverge into a single, though they have their own separate lines, but they diverge into a intersection, and then right at the intersection they point to this entity, which obviously is their superclass. It's because these are the common attributes, no? Yes, stated in this label here. These are the common attributes for these three entities. Now later, as you observe also, we have this label here. We'll talk about it later in the next few slides. But so next we have the opposite of generalization, which is specialization naman, no? So this time, this is the process, no, ito yung paraan ng pag-maximize ng mga differences between each members, no, of an entity by identifying their distinguishing characteristics. Now, to give you an example for that, let's say for example we have the staff entity. And let's say lahat ng mga attributes that are related sa staff, no, or are iisa, no, they are listed as into a single staff na entity, no. Now, let's say for example this entity, no, we're going to create a table for this one, and we're going to fill up all members of the staff, diba? Yung mga na-mention ng mga empleyado kanina in the previous examples. Let's say we're going to list them down sa table. So ganito yung magiging itsura niya. So ito. So this is the table, this is the staff entity kanina, which was converted into a table, no? And as you notice, we have here the members of the staff. So in this instance, we have 6 members, and as you notice, no, there are some attributes that hindi na-filled up, which could pose a problem, no? Kasi magiging null daw yung values nito. So, magiging null if wala kang may lalagay na values dito, no, for these blanks. So this could be a problem, no, once you translate the previous design, no, into this form. Yeah. So if we're going to apply the process of specialization on this staff entity, so we attempt, gagawin natin, no, is we're going to identify the differences between members of this entity, no, such as the members with distinctive attributes or relationships. So as we notice, no, we have here both the John White, which is a manager, and Susan Brand. These members have their in which pareho sila na yung manager start date tsaka yung bonus meron silang value. So we could say that these 2 members, we could extract this into a separate subclass, no? And also with this, itong Mary Martinez at Chelsea Robert Chin, no, these members are the only members in which yung sales area at yung car allowance may value, ba? And so on and so forth. So we could extract all of these these members that are distinct, and therefore we could come up into this same solution kanina